and welcome to another episode of the B2B Leadership Podcast. My name is Nils Vinje, and today my guest is Julia Blachman. Julia, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
Julia, I'm looking forward to digging into all things leadership, but before we get started, will you share with our audience where you're working today and what role you're in?
Absolutely. Thanks so much. I am the head of global HR here at IRONSCALES. IRONSCALES is a self-learning, AI-driven email security platform. We are extremely passionate about cybersecurity here, and all of our scalers, what we call our team members here at IRONSCALES, are really passionate about making sure that we are creating a safer tomorrow. So my role is to support the people experience, and all of HR functions from recruiting to compliance to engagement and professional development.
That's a tall order of things inside a fast-growing company. We're going to get there. I want to touch on the scalers piece. Tell me what does scalers mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's my favorite thing to talk about. I absolutely love who we are. When you really think about a population of people, right? We think about what ties us together, that DNA. And as I joined IRONSCALES this past summer, I wanted to try and figure out what is an employee at IRONSCALES. And I really distaste the word employee. It's clinical. It is, I don't love it. And so, there's team member, there's staff member, there's all these different words. And so many companies have come up with little fun, kitschy names for their team members. And so it's a challenge, but it was a lot of fun, and ours was natural. I came up with the idea of scalers, and it has really taken off. I think everyone identifies with it. We are always scaling mountains. We are always trying to crush our competition while making our customers safer and supporting each other. And being a scaler is what it means is having that DNA that we all share. So we are all different. We're all so unique. I look at it, I call it the scalar way. So everyone's unique, but we're all similar. We have that same thread that kind of is threaded throughout who we are. And so that's what being a scalar is. And if you're a scalar, you know it. And you feel it the minute you walk in the door here. And it's a great community.
That's fascinating. I'm a big fan of brands and brands for teams, and even at whole company level, which is awesome. And just what you noted there is so important and such a big differentiator from a leadership perspective, where you could have a group of people and just refer to them as employees or team members or whatever. But when you change one word and you assign a meaning to that word and associate this identity that is bigger than any one individual, that's incredibly powerful. I mean, people, I bet, want to get out of bed to live up to being a scalar. Am I right?
Absolutely. I mean, it really makes such a difference. And to be honest, didn't realize what a difference it was going to make. And I partnered with our marketing team, and we actually created a logo for the Scalar logo, and we use it on things, and I've added it to swag and things like that. Our CEO sends a weekly update, and he says, hi Scalars, and everyone is constantly using it now, and it really has united us. And that was one of the biggest challenges during the last, year and a half of the pandemic and everyone being remote and global. How do we unite each other? And now we feel like one scalar family, one scalar team. It really does. I think it's motivating, and it's really nice. Everyone wants to be a scalar. When I'm interviewing people, even if they feel like it's not the right fit, which I always respect when somebody says that. And I think, we've talked about that before. It's amazing when people have the confidence to say, you know what, I love this company. I love what you're doing, but I don't think I'm the best person for this role, but I really want to be a scalar. Yeah. And I love that.
That's amazing that somebody could say, I'm not right for this role, but I want to be part of your company, right? And that doesn't happen very often, because oftentimes when you're interviewing with the company, you're only looking at one particular role and hoping that it's a great entree into the company. But to build demand to the point where people want to be part of the company and not just in that role is incredibly powerful. So let's dissect this just a little bit more, because this is a really important point that I think anybody can take away. And I've done a lot of work with the teams and leaders and organizations that I've worked with and my own as well, to build an identity like this, like the Scalers. And I'm curious from your perspective, you mentioned like wanting to feeling really passionate about this, number one, partnering with your marketing team. Could you break down a little bit more like the steps someone might go through if they were thinking about how do I create something that's more engaging and more of an identity than just, team X or people
Right.
X?
Absolutely. First off, it is critical to talk to as many people as you can. Mm-hmm. And that's why I got into HR, because I love talking and I love talking to people and I love knowing everybody's business, and it works for me. So this summer I joined IRONSCALES on June 1st. And so I'm still brand new, though 7 months is not really brand new at a startup, as we know. But I started by having conversations with everybody. And then really I partnered with one of our more senior employees, somebody on our product team who was instrumental in kind of helping figure that out, and talking with her, she's been here years and has, really seen the company evolve. We kind of created a web and, started with almost like a storyboard. What are the words that we want for our kind of aspirational of who we want a scaler to be, and then who are we? And there's always going to be aspirations, but it's really important. It's the same thing when you're identifying values. You want to be real about who you are today, and you want to acknowledge who you want to be. And that's why it can evolve. And so we started kind of doing that, and I was playing around, kind of creating drawings. I'm a terrible drawer, so I figured I'll go from here. But really it came down to talking to the team. What does being at IRONSCALES mean to you? I said that in every single conversation I had. Fortunately, I joined when we had just almost 60 employees, so it was a little bit more attainable to talk to the whole company. But I asked that to everybody. What do you love? What is it within my control that I can make an impact on? And what does being at IRONSCALES mean to you? And that's how it kind of evolved from there. And once we created this web, I then started playing more and met with our design team and showed them my terrible drawings and gave them all these different words. And they created this beautiful image. And it's actually, if you've seen our logo, it's a dragon, and it's a really cool @ symbol, which really makes sense for our company. And our scalar logo, it's a dragon going in a different way around an S with a lighter blue. And it's the yin and the yang, because you can't be one without the other. And I love that. And I think it's beautiful. And I think everyone should do that with their team. Always take a step back and say, who are we? And who do we want to be?
Yeah. And you hit on a couple of really important points. One, this doesn't happen by accident. Cultures in companies, especially startups, do evolve as a result of largely the founding members and the founders and the team, initial team. But there are things that are consciously decided, and then there's others that are kind of naturally evolved. But this is a disciplined action where you went to the people. You didn't come join as HR, global director of HR, and say, okay, here's our internal brand now. We're going to roll this out, and I'll train everybody. And I'm like, that would have fallen flat.
And so many people do that, and it doesn't work. It doesn't catch on. It is a philosophy of mine. I don't make decisions. I make recommendations, but I don't make decisions for the organization, for the people. I have great ideas and I suggest things, and maybe I'll come up with the 5 things on the survey, but I survey everything. I think people would prefer to take too many surveys and have their voice heard than be told these are the new benefits that we're doing. We've rolled out a lot of new benefits at IRONSCALES in the last few months, and every single one of them was based on employee feedback. They were pieces that I came up with from research, from other companies I've worked at, from colleagues, friends, networking, LinkedIn posts, things like that. But it was based on what our scalers want, because everyone is different. And so I think that also makes a difference. If you come into an organization, or if you're an executive leader and you're only thinking about your ideas and thinking that you know all of the answers, you're going to fail, because you are very wrong, because you almost never know the answers.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And that has been a consistent theme with other guests on this podcast as well, talking about the importance from a leadership perspective of not having the answers. And what you just said there right at the end captures it perfectly. If you come into an organization, sometimes the feeling is we should have all the answers. I was just hired to lead this division, department, team, whatever. Or you get promoted into that role because you were maybe the best at something XYZ. And you think it's all about you, or you think you have the answers. you're wrong.
Right.
Sorry.
And that's what makes a good leader, right? That's what we're
Right.
talking about is, being a good leader is somebody who knows their strengths, knows the areas that they have no clue, knows the areas where they know a little and can kind of get by, and is willing to be humble enough to admit it and say, I have no idea what I'm doing, or does anybody have an idea for this, or here are my 5 ideas. I think they're pretty awesome, but if you have anything better, I'm all ears.
Yeah, 100%. And there was another point that you made that was really powerful. And I think just from, your role as an HR leader inside of IRONSCALES is one thing, but absolutely 100% applies to anybody in any leadership role, that you don't make decisions. Right? You make recommendations, and you survey extensively, and you talk to the people, and you get input from lots of different sources, and then you're in a position to make recommendations because it's not about you.
Right.
It's not about what you want. It's about what the people want.
Right. Decisions and approvals are 2 very different things. You might make approvals, you might make announcements, but not the decisions.
Okay, let's dig into that, the difference between decisions and approvals. Tell me a little bit more about the difference between those things.
So, to me, it's making the recommendations to the team, whether that's the greater scalar team and I'm doing a global survey or a regional survey, or talking in the mornings on our daily senior leadership team stand up. I'm bringing the recommendations, decision is made as a team, and then there always has to be an approval system, whether it's, me putting my stamp on the paper after the decision's been made, or the CEO or the board or something like that. There has to be that final seal. Okay, this has been approved, but the decision was not made by one person. The decision was made by several people or a group of people, things like that. And then kind of once the approval gets there, then you kind of make the announcement. The announcement's my favorite part. I love making the announcements. I try to make them fun. Our monthly scalers on deck meetings are always a riot.
Okay, wait, we got to dig into this, because announcements, and you might be thinking like, wait a second, announcements from the HR team probably don't fall into the bucket a lot of times of being a riot. So tell us more about these announcements and how do you put energy into some things that are like benefits or things that are kind of, maybe a little bit more mundane.
Right. So we should survey my team after this call and see if they agree that our scalers on deck are a riot. But I feel pretty confident. But for us, it was all about taking that monthly all hands meeting and rebranding it. Branding is everything. And I love branding.
Agreed.
And so trying to figure out, how can we, even just moving it, obviously we know it's all hands on deck is what all hands stands for, but just shifting it to scalers on deck sounded way more fun. And we've moved from the traditional, one person is either delivering a lot of information or you're hearing an announcement from every department, to now we change it up every time. I ask each senior leader to think of something that's relevant within their department to share with the team, and then ask them to choose somebody on their team to present it. So we're actually having our scalers present to the rest of our scalers. I always believe peers learn better by peers. Other professional development programs I've created have always been peer-led. And peer-led, peer-spoken, all of those things, you're going to listen way more when it's your friend talking than when it's HR talking.
Agreed.
But we always started off with our CEO, who does a kind of a focus and opportunities, which I think is so great to kind of start there. And then we listen to some of the team members, and then we close it out with HR announcements. And I always try to make sure that I'm sharing some exciting news, updating benefits, but also just kind of reminding things that were happening, talking about our referral policy, giving an update on how many employees we have, how many new hires we have incoming, all those different things. So it's fun.
That's fantastic. Okay, so coming back to the brand, the scalers, right? Incorporating that into your meeting, love it. One of the best ways to permeate a brand through everything, because it's not just the monthly all hands, it's the scalers on deck, right?
Right, exactly.
And everybody starts talking about, hey, the scalers on deck meeting is coming up. Would you like to present at the scalers on deck? And all of a sudden, there's 50 different references to this one thing that you wanted to get into everybody's vocabulary, and that continuously builds the plan. So that's awesome. And I love the fact that the senior leaders are, one, responsible for identifying what's relevant. It might be different every time, but then they're asking for members of their team to present. So it's not always about the senior leadership being up in front of everybody on a monthly basis. It's about them highlighting what's going on inside their org, but having different people present. That seems like a really, really powerful message. And that's just awesome.
Right. It's been really fun. We've done it probably 4 months now, and it's been super successful. We're planning some really fun, big kind of changes for our January one. We're going to do a big year in review and try and make it a little bit more exciting. So I do always tell them at the beginning, I know I have to top last month, so the pressure's on, but I believe in myself.
And
I believe in the team.
That's a wonderful way to look at it, is that, the last one was amazing. Okay, how are we going to top it this time? Instead of just, okay, here's the agenda. It's the same thing we go through on a monthly basis. It's one of those other boxes we have to tick, right? You're looking at it from a completely different perspective every single time and figuring out new ways to do it. You're essentially challenging everything, even with something as conceptually simple as a monthly all hands call.
Right. Exactly. Though I'm sure my whole team would tell you that the best one that I will never top was when we announced our company-wide retreat and where we were going. But,
Fair enough.
Maybe once a year, that'll be the best one.
Hey, there you go. And then you could work up to that. And then that builds excitement and anticipation. And that's awesome.
Exactly.
So on the focus and opportunities, you mentioned that your CEO opens the Scalers on Deck call with focus and opportunities. Usually there is some opening remarks by senior executive or the CEO. What exactly does focus and opportunities mean in this context?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's something he'd always done, so we left it in there because I think it's really cool. It's an opportunity for him to share. He's very approachable as a CEO. It's pretty incredible. It's beautiful to me that, at any point in time, he encourages people to put time in his calendar, send him a message, Teams him. He's very involved. And so he truly shares his perspective. This is what we're focusing on today, this month. This is what we're focusing on this quarter. This is our focus for the year. This is kind of where we need the most support from a, product or customer, or this is the angle we're going to take the product in, this and that. And then the opportunity is, this is what's happening in the market. This is kind of what investors are saying. This is really interesting article I read. He's always sharing different articles, and I always think that's really helpful. We're big on continuous learning. And so I think it's just a great opportunity to kind of go through those in our industry. People like myself, who I'm in HR. I'm in HR in tech. So I have a very little, but understanding, but I don't really understand cybersecurity. It's not as relevant to my job, but it always gives me a lot of insight and understanding as to what we're doing as as the industry evolves to get that information.
Love it. That, just the principle I'd take away from that. And again, your CEO delivering that at the monthly Scalers on Deck meeting could easily be applied to anybody listening to this podcast who has a monthly, whatever their brand is, call it, meeting with their team or perhaps department or perhaps organization, which is a lot of visibility. Right? Here's where we're focused today. Here's where we need help. Here's where the things, these are, there's the curse of context, and that every leader can fall in, right? We can assume, through no real fault of anybody's, but we can assume that everybody else knows what we know. And your CEO, sounds like, does a phenomenal job of making sure that everybody else knows what he knows in a way that he has to verbally push it out into the organization, as opposed to assuming that everybody knows that our focus for this quarter is X. Is that fair? Right. Yeah. Cool. So as you think about you guys are a fast growing company in the cybersecurity space. A lot of different disciplines and domains go into IRONSCALES. As you think about the leadership that is coming up through your organization and that you are going to be bringing into your organization over the next, call it 12 to 18 months, what are some of the most important elements of leadership characteristics that you look for in candidates or in internal candidates, either, or external? Right.
I think, as a fast growing company, fastest growing email security company in the world,
That's a big claim. I love it. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. And it's so important to make sure that we don't lose the integrity of who we are as we grow. And that comes down to that scalar DNA. Who are each of us individually? Obviously, with leaders, there is, as you start to hire for more executive roles or middle managers, you want to make sure you're looking for certain characteristics. But internal promotion is also really important as well. So making sure you're supporting your employees as they grow. So definitely our guiding principles, supportive is our number one guiding principle. And it's so important that as a human, you are supportive, approachable, all those different pieces of that kind of EQ is so important to the scalar DNA. Being curious, our CEO likes to refer to it as urgent curiosity. And I love that. I just love the way that sounds. And I think it's really important. You have to always be willing to learn and always be wanting to learn. And that's because it comes down to what we talked about in the beginning, right? You have to be humble enough to know what you don't know and willing to learn. And so part of being in a startup, you get this opportunity to be in a role that you wouldn't have if you go and work for a big box company, right? But that also means that you're probably not as senior as maybe your role is. And that's pretty cool and pretty terrifying at the same time. And so making sure that you have that interest to learn to get there and not the ego to think you're already there. It's really important to check those egos at the door. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't work. So those characteristics, I think, are really that being kind of humble and supportive and curious and probably really resourceful. It's really important too.
Love it. Yeah. The supportive element and what you define there is EQ, urgent curiosity, a fantastic phrase, might have to steal that, and willing and wanting to learn and, checking the ego at the door. And I think whether you're in a startup or a larger organization, those principles still apply. The application of those is going to be a little bit different based on your environment, as, it's just going to be the case. However, being willing and wanting to learn and being having urgent curiosity, that should permeate every part of your life. And when it does permeate every part of your life, it's a lot easier. And you're not, I'm in a leadership position now during my working day, and then I shut that off at night. It's just, no, you can always be curious about anybody.
Exactly.
Right? And that's one of the things I think is so wonderful about so many of the leadership principles that you've talked about today and that I teach and work with leaders on, is that there is no boundary to where you can be curious. There's no edge where you say, well, I have to check my ego here, but I really need to bring my ego into this room.
Right.
It's like, no, I don't think so. It's okay. Like, you can be
confident,
infinitely curious and
you
confident.
can be confident. Confident and having an ego are very different things. Again, it's exactly what we talked about at the very beginning of this, right? Knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. So being very confident that you have these strengths that you're bringing to the table is extremely important. But that doesn't mean that you have an ego. That doesn't, again, mean that you're right. That doesn't mean that you're telling people what to do. It means that you're providing recommendations. Your expertise is helping us get to a decision-making position.
Yep. And to bring forward what you mentioned before, coming back to the recommendations.
Yes.
Right? You can be confident that no matter what situation you're in, you can always talk to people like you did before, do some analysis, do some thinking, and come to the table with a recommendation.
Right.
Doesn't matter if you're running sales.
The people
company.
say the same thing in the survey that you recommended. You just look better.
Yeah.
You just look like you were on the right track.
Exactly.
But that doesn't make, other people's opinions less valuable.
Right. And it looks better because you simply amplified their voice.
Exactly.
Right? Otherwise,
100%.
if you had a different opinion or you said, well, they all said we wanted this benefit package, but no, I know that's not right. And then, that's the ego part.
Right.
But if you can be confident in doing research, talking to people, and coming to the table with recommendations, you could solve virtually any problem, or at least get to the point where, as a group, as you noted before, you can solve a problem.
Right. I love that you said amplified their voice, because to me, I always believe that HR is seen as this, well, at least in years past, it's evolving a lot now, but it's always been seen as either a paper pusher or a disciplinarian, authoritative place. But really, we are advocates for the people and advocates for the business, which is challenging, but when done right, can be really beautiful and supportive, so that you can be transparent and supportive, right? So being an advocate for the people, that's exactly what it is. It's having a voice for the people, amplifying their voice. That's the point of the surveys. And if you take it seriously and you actually take the data from the surveys and put it into action, then people feel heard.
Yeah, and they will support you and
Right.
go to bat for you when there's something that you need
Right.
help with in the future, right? They're going to only fill out the next survey if the last one was meaningful. In
Right.
other words, they provided you feedback, you took action on said feedback, even if it wasn't what they wanted, you acknowledged what they
Exactly.
submitted, then you took action in some form or way, there is a exponentially greater likelihood that they will fill out the next survey.
Exactly.
And tell you more and more honest things because they're comfortable and they believe that you'll actually trust them.
Right. And they won't feel as frustrated if you don't roll out this new program that they are advocating for, because they know that they trust you.
Yeah.
If you've listened, you've rolled out certain things, maybe not everything. So there's probably a reason why. Context. And I always give context. It's so important.
Good. And that also hits on the importance of people who want to feel heard.
Right.
Sometimes that's all it takes. It's not, their way is what they really want. If you dig really deep and you look at what they're really after, sometimes people just want to be heard. And this,
Right.
Regardless of if you're doing a survey for any kind of program, or you're dealing with a frustrated customer or a frustrated employee or whatever
Right.
it is, it's not about the solution. It's about the hearing and the listening
Right.
and being there.
Yes.
So many of the principles that we've been talking about, from the HR role and you reshaping this at IRONSCALES, directly apply to everything from a leadership perspective that's critical to embody, which I love. So I want to ask you this question. Knowing, you have so much tremendous expertise in all the things we've been talking about today. So imagine for a moment that you were able to go back in time and have a conversation with yourself, knowing everything that you know today, but yourself at that point at which you got out of, school, whatever level it was, and you were entering into the professional working world, and maybe you didn't even know you were going to be in HR yet. And what would you sit down with yourself and share from an advice perspective?
Right. I love this question. I think that I definitely did not know I wanted to be in HR. I didn't even really know what HR was. But I think that I don't believe in regrets and change of path. So I would probably just tell myself that it's going to be a weird, hard 8 to 10 years and you got this. Or something like that. Maybe I would say, go forth with a little less fear and trust yourself, because typically when I follow my gut, it's a really good decision. Yeah. And when I'm hesitant, it usually is what kind of ends up creating more challenge or a pause in things moving forward. But I think ultimately I would tell myself, really in everything in life, just jump.
Yeah.
Go for it. I went from nonprofit to tech startup and I was terrified, but best decision I ever made. And I'm so glad that I jumped, and I would not want to change that for anything.
Wonderful advice. I think we can all take a step back and think about that. And everything that we do, well, again, regardless of whether you're an individual contributor today, a manager, a director, a VP, a C-level executive, just doesn't matter. These principles apply. And you can show up in a different way if you apply some of the strategies and tactics like Julia's been sharing today. So, Julia, this has been absolutely awesome to spend some time talking leadership with you, talking about IRONSCALES. Very excited to see all the incredible things that the scalers are going to be doing. Thank you so much for sharing your insight, and would love to have you on a future episode to hear about all these incredible updates if you'd be open to it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Nils. It was a lot of fun.
My pleasure.